31st December, 1883. New Year's Eve, London, England. Any sane man would be asleep in his bed by now, awaiting the new year with dreams of spring or riches or what have you. Yet here I sit, writing furiously at my desk, contemplating taking the last of Dr. Gent's chloral with the last of this bottle of wine. These may only be the ramblings of a sleepless drunkard, yet I feel I must set them down in writing, lest they distort and grow fainter in my mind. Perhaps with morning and sobriety they will seem less. That is at least my fervent hope. The doctor's chloral worked well at first. I slept like a child through the night, and woke in the morning refreshed and feeling, for lack of a better word, alive. This continued for several days, and there was neither hide nor hair of the red door. I grew so confident in the end of my ordeal that I unlocked the basement door and ventured inside, taking a lantern with me, the better to examine the door closely. Nevertheless, it was still with some apprehension that I approached the door. It seemed, in the darkness of the basement and the machinations of my mind, to have grown more sinister in the time it had been locked in the basement. I approached it cautiously, but when there was no sign of danger, I grew bolder. I looked over the door, its peeling paint, its brass handle, its tiny keyhole. I even touched it several times, lightly, to confirm that it was simply a door, nothing ethereal or supernatural. I bent down and peered through the tiny keyhole, holding my lantern close. Here I will swear to whomever may be reading, upon whatever you may ask of me, when I looked into that keyhole, there was another eye looking back through it. I leapt back, my lantern shattered on the ground, and went out. I dashed from the basement, bashing my shins several times in my flight. Sequestered in my room, shivering and disoriented, I fought my own fear to try to make sense of what had just occurred. A mirror, I posited. Perhaps there is a mirror behind the door, and it was my own eye I saw. I nodded to myself. Yes, that's it. Just a mirror. Leslie, you fool, you're jumping at your own shadow. I laughed, though there was a cold knot of dread in my stomach. I steadied myself with a glass of wine, darted downstairs, and bolted the basement door once again. No need to leave this unlocked, I muttered to myself. Probably full of rats or something. Yes, best to just lock it for now. No reason to leave it unlocked. Nevertheless, my nerves had taken a blow, and although I prepared Dr. Gent's chloral solution as instructed, sleep would not come to me. I lay awake for hours, exhausted yet unable to slow the spinning of my mind. I will not relate here the thoughts that plagued me that night. I scarcely even remember them. Suffice it to say that it was with some relief that I noted dawn's light picking out the gap in my curtains. For the next day I was on edge. I left the house quickly, purposefully keeping my gaze away from doors, lest they should turn out to be that fateful peeling red. It was all in vain, however, for when I returned home that night, I was confronted with a terrible sight in my kitchen. The door to the servants' quarters, standing blatantly before me, was no longer the pale pine to which I was accustomed. Peeling paint, brass knob, gaping miniature keyhole. This is what greeted me as I entered to reach my pantry. I stared in horror, but the door stood unchanging. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but to no avail. The door would not change back to its original state. I backed out of the kitchen, my heart pounding in my ears, and fled to my room, unsure if I should leave the house. I decided in the end that returning to Mr. Brewer with such a tale would only cause a scene, one which I was in no fit state to handle that particular night. I mixed a double batch of chloral and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, not awaking until 10 the next morning, although it was scarcely past 9 o'clock when I went to bed. Although it was my fervent hope that the incident was some trick of the mind and would not repeat itself, I hoped in vain, for later that day I found the red door skulking in the darkness of the attic entryway. It seemed to beckon me, to entreat my further investigation. The keyhole seemed somehow larger than it had been, and behind it there was a gleam or glint as of an eye peering through. I fled the house altogether, my hands shaking and my breath rattling in my throat. I spent Christmas with Mr. Brewer, although I told him nothing of my further encounters with the Red Door. It was with considerable dread that I returned home afterwards. Once again, I prepared a double batch of the chloral solution, and slept well enough for it. This continued for 3 further days. Sometimes the door would make its appearance in the morning, and I would spend the day feeling nauseous and put off. Another day the door would not appear until late at night, leaving me to spend my day in dread anticipation of its appearance, jumping at shadows. My nights were spent buried beneath a double dose of the chloral. Even that, however, proved to not be enough. On the 4th night, after discovering the Red Door lurking just outside my bedroom, doubling the doctor's formula did not put me to sleep. I mixed another single batch after an hour of exhausted wakefulness, and that tipped me over the edge into sleep. I was now running dreadfully low on the chloral hydrate, and I feared what might happen to me should I run out entirely. I could not go back to Dr. Gintz so soon. It would be obvious to him that I had not followed his prescription instructions, and he might deny me further medication. I shuddered to think how extreme my hallucinations might become should my brain be further deprived of sleep. You may wonder, then, what has caused me to write this frenzied account of my actions. I will admit that it is partially the drink. I have had such an experience today as would drive any man to drink. Still, you will surmise that this cannot be the only reason. Indeed, 2 incidents have prompted me to note down what many may consider an account of my madness. But it is not madness, and I have found proof. The first incident occurred this morning. Upon opening my paper, I noted a small advertisement. It was only 2 lines of text, yet it set my hands shaking. I have seen the Red Door, and an address in Soho. It could not be a coincidence. Could there be some other poor soul out there, haunted as I was by the continued stalking of this dread portal? If there was, how could it be possible that my basement door was appearing to others outside of my house? Had it truly managed to escape the grounds? Besides all these questions and the rise in apprehension they brought with them, there was still a glimpse of comfort in the advertisement. I was not alone. This was not madness as I had feared. There was some physical reality to the appearances of the Red Door. Or if it was madness, it was at least a shared madness, which was some sort of strange comfort in and of itself. I resolved to visit the address as soon as an opportunity presented itself. Second incident. It still brings me great distress to write of. It was scarcely an hour ago, and ever since I have been trembling uncontrollably. I have drunk almost an entire bottle of wine, and this has steadied my hand somewhat. I am exhausted, but I cannot sleep, not with the terrible burden that has descended upon me. Enough. I must simply write it down and take the last of the chloral. Perhaps morning will bring an end to this terrible fear that has gripped my heart. An hour ago, as I sifted through the attic's clutter, I found it. I found the key to the door. God save me from my own curiosity. I feel I must now open it. 1st January, 1884. I woke this morning considerably better off than I went to bed last night. Though my head was pounding and my stomach churning, I had, in my deep sleep, come to a conclusion. I would go to Soho today, seek out the man who had seen the Red Door, and we would decide together what might be done about it. The key I have placed on a chain round my neck. It is a tiny thing, unassuming, yet there is something about it, some aura of gloom, that leaves me convinced it can unlock no other thing but the Red Door. I took the train into London and had a small lunch at a corner cafe. The meal helped to settle my stomach, and a glass of wine steadied my nerves. I resolved to walk to the address in hopes that the brisk morning air would sharpen my senses and my wits. I was surprised to find that the address in the paper led not to a flat, but to a small antiquities shop. Maximiuk Antiquities was emblazoned over the door, and the window displayed a vast collection of what could only be described as junk. I entered, wondering if somehow I had been mistaken as to the intention of the message. Inside it was dim and dusty, smelling of wood varnish and silver polish. I walked cautiously through the jungle of bric-a-brac to the counter. As far as I could discern, I was alone in the shop. "Hello?" I called. There was no answer, no sound but for the continuous rumble of London outside and the ticking of antique clocks inside. "Is anyone there? The door was unlocked." From the back of the shop there was a clatter, hurried footsteps, and a voice calling in a foreign accent, "One moment! One moment!" There emerged into the dusky light of the shop a young woman, fair of skin and hair, breathless from hurrying to the front of the shop. I was struck almost speechless by the intensity of her presence. "Oh, I do beg your pardon, ma'am. I hope I am not interrupting anything," I said, clutching my hat to my chest. "What? No, not at all. What can I help you with, sir?" Her voice was thick with some sort of Eastern European accent, Russian perhaps, and was musical as a flute. "Well, I floundered. This could not be the one who had taken out the advertisement. "Is your supervisor here? Mr. Max—" She laughed, a golden bell-like sound. "Maximiuk," she corrected. "And I am proprietor of this shop." She extended a slender hand. "Anna Maximiuk," she said. I took her hand gingerly, expecting to kiss the knuckles, but instead she gripped my hand like a vice and shook it vigorously. Leslie Fletcher," I said belatedly. "I saw your advertisement." Her bright face went grave suddenly. "You have seen it, then?" she murmured. "Bоже mой, I thought I was only one." "The red door!" I insisted, suddenly excited beyond reason. "Peeling paint, brass knob!" "And teeny tiny keyhole," she finished, demonstrating the size of the keyhole with her thumb and forefinger. She nodded gravely. "Yes, Red Door, he lives in the back of shop, mostly. Some days, poof, he is not there." "My basement," I asserted. "It started in my basement, and now it's all over the house." She raised her eyebrow at me. "The Red Door, he moves?" I nodded emphatically. Yes, I see it everywhere now, all over the house." "He does not move here. He is either in his spot or he is, poof, not at all." "But—" I hesitated. "Why did you take out the advertisement?" She shrugged, tossing her head imperiously. "I have bad feeling about Red Door, like he wants to be opened. I do not want to open. Not alone. So I find out if anyone else sees him. And you come, Mr. Fletcher. So now I do not open door alone." "It's locked," I said, quite before I knew what I was doing. Her eyes gleamed. "Ah, so he calls to you as well." I clutched at the key around my neck. "Look, this has all been a mistake. I shouldn't have come here. I am sorry for wasting your time, Miss Maximiuk. I must be going." "Go then!" She spat at me. "And when Red Door he eats you alive, you will not come cry to me." Offended, flustered, I left the shop without a further word, jamming my hat on my head as I exited. Behind me I heard Anna Maximiuk bolt the door. I returned home shortly afterwards, keeping an eye out for the Red Door, which has not yet made an appearance. Upon reflection, my behavior was ridiculous, uncalled for. She most certainly had a point about the door wanting to be opened. As I write, I reconsider my decision. Tomorrow, or perhaps the day after, I shall return to Miss Maximiuk's shop and make reparations. Certainly, in a case such as this, 2 heads are better than 1. I shall attempt to sleep tonight without help from the doctor's chloral, which I have unfortunately used up. I am not hopeful for sleep.